All right. So, well, thank you then so much for tuning in to this talk, and thank you so much, Professor Maria Cerdas, for being here. Also for Patricia and for organizing everything. Thank you, the School of Modern Languages, for the space and all of the technical aspects of it in order to be able to broadcast this to people.
Leonardo.
Yes.
Well, first of all, good morning. This presentation is organized by the Comisión de Vínculo Externo and the School of Modern Languages at UCR. Okay, this is Before the Point of No Return, Approaches to Climate Change, section in the ESL classroom. And before you get started, I'm going to tell people in here a little bit about you. Leonardo Chinchilla Mora is an independent EFL teacher and language consultant. He graduated from the University of Costa Rica with a bachelor in English. He also holds a master's English studies from the University of Helsinki, specializing in literature and English teaching. His MA thesis explores the depiction of New York from an eco-critical perspective and the critiques of capitalism through the sci-fi novel. Am I right?
Cli-fi,
sorry, novel, New York 2140 by Kim Stanley Robinson. So, whenever ready.
Thank you so much. Yes, Cli-fi is precisely the thing that I'm going to be talking today about. The Cli-fi, or more commonly known as climate change fiction. I should be sharing my screen as of now. Do just let me know. Yes, correct. All right. And so this is towards for us teachers and anyone interested in the teaching of a language through literature, right? That's what we are going to be looking at. And first, I'd like to just start with a simple question, and you can start your, open your mics or just write in the chat real quick. My question is, when was the last time you felt inspired to pick a book and read about nature?
Well, to tell you the truth, no, I haven't been inspired to read about nature, but I know that that's bad. It's not what a global citizen should say. And yes, I feel bad about myself concerning that.
You should not, that's fine. How about
I guess we kind of assume that nature is also part of literature. Like we will eventually find different kinds of references to it as we read. Like we take it for granted somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about a documentary? Perhaps not reading, but getting to know something about nature? Perhaps?
Yes. Concerning news articles, reports, or documentaries, yes, I think I feel more compelled to read, perhaps because it's more fact-oriented. And that could be the reason. And I think that your talk will certainly clarify and inspires us to do both.
I hope so. See, many of the cultural representations that we give to nature have to do with us humans, right? And so when I ask you this question, when was the last time you felt inspired to read about nature, you probably thought a very long and boring description, which you always sort of skim through and go all the way to where the action is, right? Culturally speaking, then our relationship with nature has been backgrounded, has been always put like this picture in the background, just there, adorning. That's just an umbrella. That's all it is. But truly, nature shapes everything we do, absolutely everything we do. Some of you might know that I'm currently in Spain at the moment. I'm doing my doctoral studies here. And a few weeks ago, no, actually it was last week, was super windy. And unfortunately, there was a tragedy here in Madrid, in which a tree fell on a young woman, and unfortunately, she said she passed away, given the environmental conditions, right? And so part of everything that we do in today's life, in our life, is always connected to nature, no matter what metropole we're living in. And that is part of what my research has surfaced to do and surfaced to show, right? And so let me tell you more about this kind of literature. As I go about this presentation, you will see various titles here and there. There are recommendations. So if you want to jot down the names of them, feel free to do so. I will just tell you a very brief introduction about it, and then you can make up your mind if you'd like to get a hold of this book. On the one hand, we have a scholarly recommendation. The death of nature sounds as something very, very tough. And if you would like to understand why nature is thought of as something as motherly, right, as something female, you would like to read this book. If you would like to know why nature is subjected to the will of powerful men and what exactly created the death of nature, you will like to get into Caroline Merchant's. It is a foundational work for anything that has to do with nature. And even though it is a scholarly reading, in reality, it is very approachable. It is not the kind of reading that will push you to do background research on what is this, what is that, but rather will take you by the hand and show you exactly how we went about, for example, developing New York, right? How we went about historically talking about how we moved spaces and we moved and sacrificed the love of nature in order to create Long Island, for example. So one recommendation over there. On the other side, we have the very first novel of climate change fiction that I ever read. It's Odds Against Tomorrow. Situated, thematically speaking, in Hurricane Katrina. Actually, the writer was, very interestingly, he was writing this novel when Hurricane Katrina happened. And so he was said to sort of have predicted Hurricane Katrina in a very cool way. All right, so those two for now. There's one more over here. I'll talk about it soon, but first let me give you the contents then of this presentation. 3 things I'm here to do. Lay out a theoretical foundation for climate change. Talk to you about sustainable development goals and the potential for a pedagogy, an eco-pedagogy. And then talk to you about a little bit about the approaches to teaching literature. Finally, some questions, if you'd like to. This other book over here, Staying Alive, again, nature being so subjected. This is by another author, Vandana Shiva. Nature being so subjective to everything that we do. This one talks, as you can see, about women and ecology. It is about how we have, the patriarchy has wanted to kill nature and has basically given a lot of metaphors for women and to nature. And so it's a very similar kind of argument. But if you'd like to, this is another recommendation. Again, both of them are super approachable. All right. So getting started then with the framework for my presentation, which is then climate change fiction. First of all, I would have to start by telling you what science fiction is. And so this definition that we have over here is actually something that we came about, colleagues and I, when I was taking a science fiction course at the University of Helsinki. And so that's why it's not in any kind of a quotation mark, it's not an official definition, so to speak. It reads, Science fiction uses technology or science concepts beyond what we can currently understand, which may be totally unreal or feasibly attainable, to explore the human condition speculatively through an abstraction of current issues. It sounds a lot. It's a very English majory definition we have come up with. But it needn't be, really. And so I've just put these three words over here to talk about what science fiction has been doing and what it is generally known as or for. It is known for speculation. It's known for transhuman thought, which is what does it mean to be human? And it's also known for the political, right? What is political in general? So science fiction comes about 100, some people say 200 years ago, some people actually take Frankenstein as part of science fiction. And it came just to think, what happens if it came to analyze, rather, I would say, what happens if we continue acting in the way that we have been acting, right, for many years ahead. It's a process called extrapolation. And so it engages with all the topics. What happens, for example, if ChatGPT goes rampant on the world? Or what happens if this, etc. Usually, as we claimed in this course, mediated by technology, right? So this is already in the background of 180 years or so ago. Great works came about, space operas, and something, for example, the work of Ursula Le Guin. All of this came about to give that prompt, that push of science fiction, but usually has to do with space invasions, etc. So this is already also in the backdrop. And you might tell me, well, if science fiction is so big, why is nobody talking about it? And everyone is, actually, everyone is. These three are different newspapers, or news outlets, I'd rather say, that are talking about it. And so I wonder if I could borrow a few of your words, or your voices rather, to help me read this, so I can break out the monotony of my voice. Would anyone be willing to help me read what The Guardian says in 2021?
I'll help you with that one, Leonardo.
Thank you so much.
Amitav Ghosh had questioned why so few writers, himself included, were tackling the world's most present issue in their fiction. But now, as extreme weather swirls around the globe, melting glaciers, burning forests, flooding districts, and annihilating species, would that be?
Annihilating.
The climate emergency has brought the unimaginable into our daily lives and literature.
Thank you so much. Very right. So we have the unimaginable, right, coming through, and the annihilation of species. Certainly. Now, The Atlantic then on the other side says, and that's showing up in fiction. I cut off that part, so I don't know exactly what it was referring to, but we'll find out. An increasing number of writers are weaving climate change into their domestic dramas or their comedies of errors as an unavoidable part of life, or in the very near future. Environmental degradation isn't the main thrust of these novels, like it may be in the classic climate fiction. And lastly, I have earth.org.
If you want, I can help you with that one.
I would love that. Thank you.
as we grapple with the confusion and disruptive changes of a warming world, all our anxieties, dreams, and fears are being transcribed into gripping fictional tales of hope, despair, and resilience. In the decades and centuries to come, it may well be that readers and lovers of books will be analyzing the early 20th century's works of literature to understand how humanity coped in such a pivotal time for our species.
Very good. Thank you. Righty. And so clearly, we, in the midst of speculating, in the midst of exploiting the resources that science fiction gave us, all of a sudden, something science fiction-y happened to us, right? And we just have to go back a couple years and think of the pandemic. Everyone felt like they were in a movie. One day they tell us, go to classes. I was in the University of Helsinki. When I was taking this very course, I took 1 week in person and everything was rolling down normally. The next week, go back to your houses. They changed the whole system in a weekend, and then we started doing Zoom, the next one. It was crazy. It was truly crazy. But you see, then in so much speculating, we're thinking, oh man, what happens if this? What happens if that? Our speculations all of a sudden started turning into a natural wonders, or worries rather. And this started happening. And then your next question might be then, what happens in 2023? Even more of the same. These headlines over here, these are just this year. Just a few. I couldn't fit all of what there is. You see, climate change fiction is no longer dystopian, just a reality, right? So that is what a climate change fiction then comes as. This idea of a prediction of the future, what can happen. But more than just science fiction being oriented towards nature, truly cli-fi or climate change fiction comes about in a beautifully wrapped way to tell you this can happen. Act now. And that is the most insightful part of it, right? This is something that can happen or that has happened. Do something about it. So it is a cautionary tale in reality. More on the definition in a little bit. But now let me just sway slightly into what some scholars have come to call an eco-pedagogy. So Mieczysek, among them, has talked about the environmental literacies, the critical environmental literacies, as the ability to read and reread environmental problems in many, many ways, right? So we, over here in this slide, basically we have the idea that we can critically analyze something both locally and globally. You have it here at an individual level, at a collective level. Right? And so it's not only just the awareness of knowing climate change is out there happening. It's much more about that. As Sinia was saying just now, as Professor Sinia, sorry, was saying just now, it is about global citizenship, right? It is good to know about nature. That's what it is. So this is just a glimpse at the eco-pedagogy that I want to tell you more about. Here, this is just a brief commercial to tell you. You might have noticed that I stopped putting books here and there. It is because I came up with this resource for everyone interested in the talk and everyone interested in the conversation. This is my website. It's called 21C Writing Modern Issues. But you visit it like this, 21modernwriting.com. As you scroll down, you'll find this, which I started prior to the talk, I'm still updating now, and I will continue to be updated. But there's every single resource I have possibly thought of for people to start talking and teaching this. What do I mean by that? Vocabulary. I mean, also understanding what climate change is, how natural it is, getting to a real conversation about it. And also ways in which you can teach and what vocabulary you can teach your students so they can talk about this problem or challenge in a very proficient way. Right? What is a tipping point, for example? What is collective engagement? All of these, everything that you would possibly need, I believe, is there for you to get started. So if you have the time, check it out. Start it or save it somewhere. Righty. Now, about the pedagogy and the sustainable development goals. Some of you might be aware of it, but the United Nations has come up with sustainable development goals. They translate to goals that as a society we can reach in order to have a fairer society, a fairer world in the future. Many of these Scandinavian countries have already been working on them for a very long time. And you can see all of these 17 goals here. Along with this big commitment and goals for the world, we then are faced with another issue, which is then we need new students. We need students with new competences, I would rather say. We need students that have a global competence. So one resource over here, you're going to see the cover of the book in the following slide. It's also in my blog. It's a whole guide for how to teach global competence in a rapidly changing world. That's the title of it. Which then, as you will read over here, matches perfectly with the idea of an eco-pedagogy. Right? It says, quote, both EOCD and the Center for Global Education have identified 4 aspects of global competence in the youth. Investigate the world beyond their immediate environment, right? Usually this is referred to as glocality, local and global. Being able to recognize and understand other people's views. This is perhaps one of the biggest works we have to do in today's generations. Communicate ideas, engaging properly with different cultures. And of course, all of this is theoretical if we do not take the actions we need. So let me show you the book. It's barely a book. It's a booklet, more like. It's, I believe, under 50 pages, 44 or so. And on page 6 already, it tells us all of these things that are here. I know they're a little cramped, but we can do our best. So in order for you to approach climate change fiction and with an eco-pedagogy, you will have to do many of these things. Like structured debates and organized discussions are things we usually have. But here is the kicker. Here's the little thing that is going to change. And I can read over here. It says, help students learn, express their perspectives, back up their opinions and evidence, listen for understanding, and also be willing to change their minds when confronted with new information. End quote. Why is this so important? Because we are in a world where people fight everyone on TikToks And in the comment section of every social media, we want to know who is with us and who isn't, right? The world of immediacy has come about to give us very easy targets in ways in which we can overgeneralize people's behaviors, right? We have now come up also with the famous, for example, red flags for everything, not just relationships. And so it's important that we hear someone else's side and we're able then to change our mind if we will to do so. One example of a discussion like this, let's say you enter a classroom, you're reading Odds Against Tomorrow, the novel that I just recommended you earlier. And you ask the class, okay, people are going to be in two groups. Who wants the newest iPhone on one side, and who is just fine with the phone he or she has? We split that, we have a discussion. Later on, we can bring the concepts of perceived obsolescence, right, of planned obsolescence, and we can think of the nature of that device making. We can think of all of these things. And little by little, we can then have a conversation about the nature of the phone industry and all of these things. Tracing little by little the objects. There's a lot of research in climate change, in eco-criticism about where objects end, when wrapping papers end, where, I don't know, things like cases end, right? So these are the discussions we can have. Playing games, well, ludic is always going to be good, but also look at the focus. It is on finding solutions. What is the best solution for X, Y problem, etc. I encourage you highly to go about reading this book. As I said, it's barely a book. Just before changing the slide, I'd like to discuss this current events discussions. Because truly, there's something called eco-anxiety. It's being termed as that, which is the fear of what is going to happen with me and in the future, right? I have no good prospect of retiring myself, let alone my kids, right? That will be very difficult. So how can we phrase that in order to make them better understand their role in the future, to give themselves better opportunities for the future? Current event discussions have to be very informed. And the problem is that there's a lot of sensationalism outside. The idea that in order to increase the click rate of my website, I'm going to just create the flashiest headline and make you click. And that's all I earn. I don't inform you, I just scare you. And that's the world we're living in. And climate change is unfortunately unable to escape that. To give you an example of that, I had a correction, let's say that, of a friend of mine who is a journalist, and she uploaded a story on the 6th extinction. And she has a really good audience. I just approached her with letting her know that the way it was approached may just cause fear. You know? Because when you hear, and this is maybe something you will be hearing more often now, we are in the midst of the 6th extinction. What do you think? That we caused it, don't you? That we have caused 6 massive extinctions. But in reality, once you unearth that, you realize 5 of those extinctions have happened way before we were even. The last of that extinction was the dinosaurs. And so in reality, that's not the point of the argument, right? The point is the extent to which we are annihilating species. That is all. And so be very sure to educate your students and in the way that they can truly grasp what is being said and not just hear the message and collapse even. Right. So over here, then I have another proposition for this eco-pedagogy, which is that when we're teaching for global competence, English and its status as a lingua franca, as a language of the world, will change. And thus our approach to teaching, it has to change a lot too. What I mean is, if you're familiarized with English status as a lingua franca, the whole idea of this body, this research body, is that there are currently more individuals speaking English that are non-native than there are native. And because of that, sociolinguistically speaking, English is changing in ways that we're no longer ascribing to maybe how does the Brit or the American says this, because the conversation is not being had with any of them. Right? Maybe I'm a Costa Rican talking to an Indian. Who is the native speaker? No one. We're just using English. So if I come and say, oh man, it doesn't come to head, it doesn't come to head. And then the person understands that what I mean is it doesn't come to mind. That is perfect, right? And so teaching, as we teach this global competence, personally, I argue, we have to go more about the global approach to English and be able to teach them more flexible rules. Stop worrying about how you say things and start caring about the content of what you say. To that end, for example, whenever I teach speaking, I make a very good emphasis on these sounds, the ones that are hard for people to get. Also making very evident that these things can happen. Right? For example, when we speak with Indians, we have B and P without this plosiveness of pop, right? That makes it really difficult to understand if he's saying Peter or Peter. These things are the kinds of teachings that you can give also to have a more global approach. Now then, to the last bit of my presentation. I believe I'm running out of time. And well, what can literature do for us? What can this kind of literature do for us? It can help us build emotional resilience. A big deal of climate change is conceptualizing it as an us and them issue. Naturally, our brain is wired to do that. Who am I and who are you? We are distinctive features. We don't do so well with everything being the same. One resource that I added, I think last week, to my blog about this gives you the proper language to talk about climate change, right? Let's not talk about climate deniers and climate defenders. Let's find a different word that does not at all involve a divide. Let's bridge that gap through language first. So it builds on those new words. It builds on emotional resilience to be able to have someone with privilege tell us, I don't want to give up my privilege, right? It helps us then also reframe the situation. Like I told you, it's this beautifully written cautionary tale they give to us. We read it, understand, and we are able to, as Amitav Ghosh says, draw our map outside of this planetary crisis. It can help us accept change in the sense that, for example, we often, at least adults, are very stuck in our ways, right? I've always had this kind of car. I've always done this. I don't want to change it. Let's say that tomorrow there was a world mandate in which you have to devote 5 hours of your time to grow your own food. Otherwise, you go to jail. That's a great fiction project, by the way. I haven't done it, so if you want to, go ahead. If that is the case, and there's a reason for it, right? Let's say being more environmentally mindful, etc. The young are more likely to do it than we are. Because we're like, oh, why would I do that? I'd rather watch Netflix, or I'd rather do more exercise, or sleep, or write this paper in the case of academics. So it helps us accept the changes that are to happen, because we have to make a lot of changes before 2050 in order to actually steer this up and make it better. And along with that, then there's a process of grief. Unfortunately, more and more literature shows that the things that we have done now already are too far, or have too far-reaching consequences to be able to stop what we've done, right? For some species, it will be too late. And it will be a loss in biodiversity, especially for us Costa Ricans. So it will help us process that grief, emotionally speaking, and direct change into the future. To show you some of the beautiful things that climate change fiction does, I want to ask you if you know what these are. I know this is a butterfly. I just want to know what kind of a butterfly it is.
The monarch.
Monarch, yes. All right. Do you know what they are famous for?
Their migrations.
There you go. Good. How do you know that? You who did not read about nature.
Because I read National Geographic.
There you go. Good. Right. So you see, you do read about nature. You just don't think about it in that way. So truly, I learned about this not by reading National Geographic, but by reading Barbara Kingsolver's Flight Behavior. Beautiful tale that intersects belief in God and in science with scientific evidence. This is precisely what Barbara Kingsolver has admitted in interviews that she wanted to talk about this intersection. What happens when, for example, people who are uneducated, right, or simply ignorant, like I was before reading this, sees this bunch of butterflies in some random farm, and I think they're dead, or they're simply a miracle, right? Then scientists come in and tell me, no, they're actually doing a migration because, spoiler, I won't tell you. Right? It's a generational also migration that they do, meaning grandma stars and grandson ants. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And so that's part of what climate change fiction can do. It sensitizes you to care about everything that is non-human. This is, I believe, my last slide before the questions, and just reminding you of some of the approaches you can have in terms of approaching literature that you can also have with climate change literature. exploit the texture and the covers. Designers do a lot to do this, right? To call your attention with flashy colors. So exploit that. Give your students simply the cover. What do you think about them? Like, what is this, for example, if we go back to King Silver, right? What does it seem to be about? And let them go rampant about them. Make a case. They don't have to be right. Engagement through media. In a recent course that I proposed to the Department of ESP at the University of Costa Rica, I proposed that they did a journal, a social media journal, in which they would be writing their exposure to media, to climate through media. So they would have to write simply, what is being shared in social media from my friends about nature? Is it climate disasters only? Is it nice videos of turtles, which I have a lot in my Instagram? Is it dogs? Is it cats only, right? So they would have to write that down and then analyze those things. Same as it went with my slide on 2023 for the headlines. They can analyze those, and then we can have an even more critical conversation about what kind of mindset or what kind of what political side the journalist is in while writing on this. What happens, for example, if I just do climate change disasters? What do I gain from doing that? And finally, my most cherished, I would say, projects, which are literary analysis or creative projects. You can do cross analysis. Let's say you read a novel, you assigned your students making a poem. You read a poem, you analyze your students making a novel. No, I'm kidding. Not so extreme, but you can definitely see how you can cross and do drama, for example. These things. If you ask me what would be my top three, well, my top three would be for recommendations, I'll give you these. Starting on the right, Memory of Water by Emmi Itaranta. That's a Finnish from Finland. And this novel I actually taught in an ESP course. The assignment was as easy as reading the novel. And it was ESP for mixed groups. So I had people from everywhere. And all I did was talk to me about how water affects your major. Profe, pero estudio música. I study music. Tell me, tell me how it affects you, because I'm pretty sure there is a way, right? Make, of course, references to the novel, etc., etc. But you can see then the way in which you can just drag critical analysis into nature, because we are part of nature. We're embedded in it. Ministry for the Future. I liked this one so much that I'm writing a paper on it, analyzing empathy and sympathy. It's voted as one of the best climate change books in 2022, I believe. 2020, maybe, one of those years. You can see it's by the author I did my thesis on, so, well, you can see my inclination there. But particularly, I like it because I don't like to read just that the world is going to end. I like to read about the change that we can make. And this does a very good job at telling you that we don't always have to wait for the big bosses, the First Nations, to do the work and then follow suit. But rather, we can change together. We can even lead change. And in the odd event that you don't have time for a novel, No More Fairy Tales is a short collection story. I'm sorry. A short story collection that not only gives you a really compelling tale, but also towards the end, it has a link. If you go into that link, you will read more about an actual project that is happening right now in the world that tells you, for example, this amount of energy can happen, this and that. In 10 years, that which you read as fiction will be a reality if we let it happen. So it links projects that are in place right now or developing with fiction based on those projects. So it's the best way to motivate your students to really think of this as no point of return, but definitely before the point of no return. And with that being said, I'll just stick around for questions if you have any. And I again thank you so much for your time and your attention.
Oh, yes, I have a question, or it's actually more a comment, if I may. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for this excellent talk and for the issues that you raised. It has been very, very important in terms of making us aware of what is at the bottom of this. In my personal case, I wasn't aware of the terms eco-anxiety and climate grief, which, as I said, personally helped me explain why I feel reluctant to reading those novels that you have recommended. I knew at least 2 or 3 of those that you have recommended, but it's because, as you explained, there's the issue of eco-anxiety, of how we are being fed on catastrophe, and who wants to, aside from already living it and reading about it and being fed on it, who wants to continue to do that. But you have very successfully clarified that it's going beyond that, knowing that that exists, but our issue is to explore through these different ways that you recommended, to explore who we are, to revisit our identity and who we are at an individual level and at a collective level. Because as you said, you mentioned excellent issues like we are part of a consumer-oriented mindset, of a capitalist mindset, and we have to think or rethink what our values are, what privileges we have, and why, and what do they really mean? I mean, what for? We have those privileges, yes, but what for? Do I really need that new iPhone if my phone is already working? And why do I need a new one? So all these issues that make us think who we are, what we do, and the impact of all our actions. And in terms of women, the issue that you mentioned about women, the connection of women and nature, I think that's another excellent topic that we can certainly explore with our students, the connection between power, the power that men have had throughout the centuries, and what that means in terms of our responsibility as women, because it's not only counteracting that power irresponsibly to simply show that we can also do whatever men do. That's not the point. The point is to do it better and differently for, right? Not simply so, okay, yes, we are women and we need to reach that equality, and now I'm going to do whatever men are doing too. And no, it's to rethink our role in a different way. And in the end, to be able to work on developing that global competence to find solutions, to take action. And yes, thank you very much for making us aware of all these different issues.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment, and I truly hope that we are now a little bit more aware that this message gets across.
Leonardo, I would like to add that I find it very interesting in the sense that, I mean, environment is a topic that is addressed in every single textbook I teach. But now I'm thinking about it in a different way, and you have definitely given me a new perspective on how to approach it, because it's usually something students, have been talking about ever since they were in high school, and probably they believe we're not adding, or there is nothing else we can discuss about this, and there are many things that we can also say and discuss about the topic. So thank you very much for that.
Very, very welcome. Yeah, in reality, we can never stop talking about nature, right? Not even until the climate change crisis ends, right? And well, for those here and for those who will be watching this later, to know that there's hope, and that is why I'm committed to these kinds of information sharing events and informing us, right? That's evidently the biggest role of academia, to be able to inform us about the changes that we can still make before the point of no return. Right.
All right. Thank you very much, Leonardo, and thank you very much all.
Truly welcome then. I think if there are no further questions or comments, well, we could call it now a day.
Thank you.
Bye.